Hi everyone, I'm Naya,
And I'm Christine.
and we work at the Boz Life Science Research and Teaching Institute here in San Diego, California.
Come inside with us and we'll tell you all about our project looking at the Tijuana River Estuary.
At our lab, we research how gene expression changes under different conditions, how cells communicate with each other, how organisms develop, and how the environment affects both human and ecosystem health.
What's special about our lab is that we teach high school students how to do research and involve them directly in our projects.
Today, we're going to introduce you to our research that looks at how the pollution in the Tijuana River Estuary in San Diego affects the health of people and wildlife. The Tijuana River Estuary, or TRE for short, is an important local ecosystem and beautiful spot for recreation. But unfortunately, pollution periodically contaminates the estuary and surrounding beaches, threatening the local population. The Tijuana River Estuary is located in Imperial Beach, California, and is on the most southwestern corner of the continental United States. It is the only intact wetland in Southern California and is internationally renowned as a birdwatching destination.
Estuaries are wetlands that occur when rivers meet oceans, seas, and lakes. Saltwater estuaries like the TRE contain a mixture of fresh water that flows from the land and seawater that comes in from the ocean with the tides. To understand why estuaries are such unique and important ecosystems, we need to learn more about the fresh water that flows into them from the surrounding watershed. When rain falls or ice and snow melt on hilltops and mountaintops, excess water that can't be absorbed by plants or soil flows to lower-lying lands. Water runs from different areas and pools together to form a river. The further the river travels, the more streams and other sources of water that join it. Eventually, the river meets the ocean and forms a saltwater estuary. Coastal estuaries have what's known as brackish water. Brackish means that the water within the estuary is saltier than the fresh water from the river, but less salty than seawater, and it forms from the mixing of the river and the ocean.
The Tijuana River Estuary is special because it is the largest and most intact coastal wetland in Southern California and is one of 36 national natural landmarks in California. The estuary's protected land spans over 2,000 acres. Visitors can access the estuary to hike, watch wildlife, and enjoy the peace of the park through designated trails designed to protect sensitive habitats. Estuaries bring a lot of benefits to the local environment. The Tijuana River Estuary serves as a protective barrier to the coast, helping prevent coastal erosion and sudden storm surges. It also contains a lot of nutrients from the river that are used by different organisms that live there. The TRE is home to a variety of wildlife like mussels, snails, brush rabbits, fish, rattlesnakes, gray foxes, and of course, birds. The estuary is especially famous for bird watching. Over 370 species of birds have been spotted there. The reason for this is that the estuary is an important stopover point on the Pacific Flyway, a migration path used by many birds on the West Coast, including endangered and threatened species.
A unique feature of the Tijuana River watershed is that it is in both U.S. and Mexico, meaning that the Tijuana River estuary receives water flow from both countries. Though the TRE is protected, it's not pristine. Pollution, most notably raw sewage, has spilled into the estuary periodically since the early 20th century. You may have even heard about this issue on the news recently. Millions of gallons of raw sewage flow through the river every year and empty into the ocean, causing beach closures in Coronado, which is 9 miles north of the estuary, and in Rosarito, which is 13 miles south of the estuary. In 2020, the shoreline next to the estuary was closed for 295 days due to the sewage spill. The sewage spills contaminate the ocean and estuary water with many different types of bacteria and viruses, which can make people sick. This means that nobody can safely enjoy swimming in the ocean near the estuary.
While it's definitely a serious and gross problem, sewage is not the only contaminant in the estuary. Trash and chemical pollutants are also present. When it rains, trash and chemicals from the land are washed into the river and flow into the estuary. This is known as runoff. Oil residue from the roads, pesticides and fertilizer from farms, and plastic bags, food wrappers, tires, and other trash from cities and households can be washed into the Tijuana River. Metals and chemical waste have also been found in the estuary, likely carried in by runoff from industrial areas. These contaminants can get trapped in the sediment of the estuary and accumulate there. Sediment is any material that settles at the bottom of the estuary and is mainly made up of rocks and organic material. Some chemical contaminants can harm organisms in the estuary and threaten the health of the entire ecosystem. While the pollution in the Tijuana River Estuary comes mostly from Mexico, the U.S. also adds to the problem. The two countries need to come together and find a solution to this international issue to protect the estuary.
The Tijuana River Estuary is dear to the Imperial Beach community, and many people come together to help protect it. The Tijuana River Action Month is an annual education and stewardship event organized by the Tijuana River Action Network. In both the U.S. and Mexico, community volunteers and organizers come together to learn about and help clean up the Tijuana River Estuary and surrounding areas. These events also highlight efforts made by different groups in restoring and protecting the estuary.
Community groups aren't the only ones committed to cleaning up the estuary. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, has promised $300 million for projects that will help minimize sewage flow and improve water quality. However, preliminary research, like our project, is needed to guide cleanup efforts and inform long-term solutions. Our research focuses on the effects of chemical pollutants on the health of the estuary. Remember when we talked about pollutants such as trash or oil residues from roads flowing into the river? Estuarine sediments can trap some of these pollutants before they enter the ocean. To identify pollutants and study where they are in the estuary and how they vary between seasons, we collect sediment and water samples at different sites and seasons. We bring our samples back to the lab, where we identify pollutants present and measure how toxic these pollutants are to sea urchin embryos.
Chemical analysis of our sediment samples tells us which and how much of a particular pollutant is present, and this helps paint a better picture of the estuary. This is important for understanding how the types and the amounts of pollutants change between weather events and also between different locations in the estuary. While chemical analysis tells us what's in the sediment, we also need to know what happens to organisms when they're exposed to a cocktail of pollutants. We use purple sea urchin embryos to test the toxicity of sediment samples. Purple sea urchins live along the Pacific coast, including San Diego, and could be victims of the pollution entering the ocean. Their embryos are very sensitive to many different types of pollutants, making them great test subjects for measuring toxicity. In these tests, we track development of embryos when exposed to the sediment and count the number of embryos that develop normally. High amounts of abnormally developing embryos could mean that the sediment contains pollutants that are harmful. This helps us identify which places in the estuary are most toxic. These two tests help us find out what kinds of pollutants are present in the estuary and how toxic they are. This is very useful information because it helps us narrow down on pollutants that are harmful and sites that are more toxic than others, so we can work on guiding cleanup efforts at these sites. In the future, we will also research which harmful bacteria and viruses are flowing through the river and into the ocean.
If you are a high school student and want to get involved in our Tijuana River Estuary research project, you can visit our website at www.bozinstitute.org. We are offering this project as an online research immersion program in partnership with UCSD Extension during the summer, and are currently open for applications. Strong science background is not a requirement to participate. We encourage all high school students with strong interest and curiosity for science to apply.